Greetings viewers, Car Doctor here, Car Doctor Studios in Anchorage, Alaska, coming to you today with this 08 F350 Super Duty 4-wheel drive. We're going to accomplish upper and lower ball joints. Similar platforms include the F250 and F350 4-wheel drive models, probably anywhere from the late 90s to current year model. Similar design and process in replacing the upper and lower ball joints. We'll tell you about a couple tools that you're probably going to need to accomplish this repair. First off, being the special tool for installation of the front axle shaft seals, the inner axle shaft seal for the vacuum type hubs. This tool is for up to 2004 year models. It's an OTC part number 6695. It actually seats the seal onto the axle shaft, and then when you're installing into the knuckle assembly, it seats it into the proper depth of the knuckle assembly. And for 05 and newer, it takes the OTC part number 6697. It's a little bit larger diameter, accommodating the spindle or the stub axle, and a little bit larger diameter knuckle surface. And you are going to have a hard time without this tool. I have heard of people fashioning something out of PCV pipe. I don't even know how they get that done. A lot of times it requires a lot of force to properly seat the seal, and you're going to need the right depth to get it inserted to the proper depth in your knuckle, and I just don't know any other way around it. I acquired this one off the Matco truck recently for about 120 bucks. You can look online and get them closer to 100 bucks. Even less for the earlier year model, the 6695 tool. But you're going to need one of these, and a foot-pound torque wrench and an inch-pound torque wrench for some of the smaller screws on this. And I'm using a lift, of course, and I've got the vehicle lifted off of my drive-on hoist, and it works pretty good for getting it at the right level ergonomically to work on. I'm also using the OTC ball joint press tool along with the four-wheel drive truck adapter set, and that makes it possible to press out the old ball joints from the knuckle and press in the new ones. You'll need a couple adapters for that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Again, I have the vehicle lifted and the tires off the surface. So first we're going to pop off the wheel and get going on this bad boy. Remove the hubcap. Remove the 8 lug nuts. Just spray a little bit of WD-40 on the upper ball joint, get that working. Going to remove the 3 locking hub cover screws. They're Torx T20. Now I'm going to remove the snap ring off of the end of the axle inside here. Now I'm going to remove the 3 screws attaching the brake hose, or I'm sorry, the 3 screws removing the ABS speed sensor wiring, and also the remove it from the plastic brackets. Now I'm going to disconnect the ABS wiring connector. And pull the wire aside. Now we're going to remove the brake caliper. These brake caliper bolts from the caliper to the mounting bracket are a 5/8 in this application. I'm going to remove the 2 bolts and set the caliper aside. You can slightly compress the caliper by putting a screwdriver through the caliper and into the rotor vanes and prying outward, thus depressing the piston slightly and allowing removal of the caliper. Now I'm going to remove the 2 bracket to steering knuckle bolts on the caliper mounting bracket. On this vehicle, it takes a 21 millimeter. I'm going to set the bracket aside. These brakes are about shot, so I bid this with the job. We're going to put rotors and pads on here, and we'll go through that on the reinstallation side of things. Remove the brake rotor. It may not just pop right off. You may have to kind of tap on the rotor head a little bit with a sledgehammer to get it to come loose. And there you go. Now I'm going to remove the tie rod end, the right outer tie rod end off of this knuckle. Remove the cotter pin. So this side has a drag link and a tie rod end. The drag link connects to the steering box on the upper side of this knuckle, and on the lower side of the knuckle we have the right outer tie rod end connecting to the tie rod. So first we remove the nut fastening the right tie rod end, and then pound on it a little bit and drop that out, and then pound on the knuckle a little bit to release the drag link in. We're going to remove the hub now by removing the 4 hub nuts on the back side of this knuckle. we can work this hub off of the knuckle. Be careful not to damage the speed sensor or the backing plate shield, but then once you got it loosened up, pull it completely off and set it aside. Now we're going to remove the axle shaft by placing a pry bar on the inside at the U-joint and pressing outward. It's a very tight seal around this this outer axle shaft seal to the hub surface. So it's going to require a lot of pressure. I use my big pry bar for that. I'm going to straighten the wheels out. Now I'm going to remove the axle assembly and set it aside. Now I'm going to remove the upper ball joint nut by removing the cotter pin first and then removing the nut. Okay, now I'm going to remove the upper ball joint nut. Takes a 1 1/8 inch socket in this case. Not going to completely remove it. I'm going to leave a few threads on it so that when I bang this thing off of here, it doesn't drop and fall on my foot. Okay, now we're going to remove the lower ball joint nut. This one takes an 1 5/16 socket. One more thing I need to do is remove the vacuum hose for the vacuum operated hubs that connects to the knuckle. All right, and now we need to get this off of here. I'm going to bang on the steering knuckle to drop this puppy out of here. Give it a few lub taps on the upper end here. And there we go. That came right out. Usually I need to hit it down here, but didn't happen. Or didn't have to worry about that. So I'm going to remove the rest of my upper nut here and drop this thing out. Couple things to double check here, and you want to make sure that the axle housing itself, the conical areas where the ball joint studs go through, that there's no wear here. If there's ever any movement in the actual stud, it can wear this out, and then you need a whole new axle housing. So you want to definitely inspect these areas for any wear and make sure that's all good. The upper actually has a eccentric built in here, which we're going to leave that alone because our alignment's not out and that's not going to need to be replaced. If you were going to need to adjust for caster or camber, you may need to install an adjustable eccentric on the upper ball joint, in which case you would just tap this thing out and install your new one and rotate it properly so that you get your alignment angle adjustment out of it. But in this case, our alignment's good. We are going to align it afterwards, of course, but we're within specs on caster and camber. We don't foresee a need. It is good to bust this loose though and clean it up a little bit so that just in case you needed to adjust it down the road, that you can get it knocked out. Okay, so good time to make sure that your axle housing is clean, that your surfaces are clean, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which is to remove and replace the ball joints from the steering knuckle, and we're going to also prepare the axle shaft for the new seal, and we'll show you how to do that over at the vise on the bench. Okay, we're over at the vise, and I've got the knuckle assembly supported in the vise, and we're going to bust these ball joints out, and there's a process that I go through to do it. We're going to start with the lower ball joint, and first we've got to remove the C-clip on the base of the lower ball joint, the retaining C-clip. Get that off of there. Discard that. Now we're going to set up our ball joint press for removal of the lower ball joint. I'm using this adapter and remove the lower ball joint first. Reposition my receiver here. Now we'll move on to the upper ball joint. Do the same thing. I'm using Raybestos premium chassis products on this job. Prefer Moog, but we again have availability problem while Advanced Auto Parts takes over CarQuest, and we're having some stock issues, but I imagine that will get squared away here shortly. But these are good parts. They work just fine. You want to stay away from the garbage, since this is a labor-intensive process and you might save a couple bucks on some junk parts. I recommend putting quality parts in there so you don't have to do this again. So first we're going to reinstall the upper ball joint. Get that one in there. In this case, I'm removing the nut on the new ball joint, and I'm also removing the grease seal deal, dust cover, whatever. And now I'm going to insert it in the end of the knuckle. Oh, that's the lower ball joint, so I'm not doing that one yet. We'll do the upper one first. And we'll insert it in there like that. I'm going to use this adapter here. Actually, I'm going to do the lower first, sorry. I'm all confused. Make sure surfaces are clean here. And we're going to slam this puppy in there. There's the adapter I'm going to use. And in order to receive the bottom of the lower ball joint into the knuckle, I'm going to use this adapter on the bottom. Got her good and snug. Install your new retainer. All right, now let's move on to the upper. No, oh no. Okay, so now we're going to install our grease zerks that come with the new ball joints. And one note, certain applications you cannot have a grease zerk in there. There will be a clearance issue between the grease zerk and the axle shaft. In this case, I have enough clearance. In other cases, you may need to first install the grease zerk, and after installing the knuckle assembly, grease the joints, but then remove the grease zerk, at least on the upper ball joint, and install the plug that comes with the ball joint. So what you need to do is, after installing the knuckle assembly, make sure that you have clearance for your axle shaft U-joint and the actual grease zerk as it rotates. In this case, we don't have a clearance issue, so I'm installing both grease zerk at this time. On the upper ball joint grease zerk, you should rotate the grease zerk so that it's facing to the rear of the vehicle as the knuckle is installed and accessible by a whip type grease hose, grease gun, so that you can get on there and there's enough clearance. All right, so let's install our seals on the ball joints. And we'll have our nuts ready so that this thing's ready to go back on the car. So next step, we're going to prepare the axle shaft seal for reinstallation into the vehicle. Okay, I've clamped the axle shaft into a vise via the outer stub shaft U-joint yoke. And now I'm going to remove this seal assembly off the end of this stub axle just by tapping on the outside of the seal. Got my replacement seal, and this application is using CarQuest number 710685 seal. And now you can see why these are so expensive. This is over $50 for the seal, and this is why you want to go ahead and get the tool, because if you goof around trying to get this installed without it, you're going to start screwing these up and costing yourself a lot of dough. So first off, make sure that your sealing surface is clean. Remember, this is a vacuum tight seal. This is airtight seal. So sealing surfaces have to be clean, and there can be no leakage. So you can't bend this or warp it or cut it or screw it up, or you'll end up with leakage and your automatic hubs won't function properly. So once you've prepared the sealing surfaces, go ahead and stick your seal on the end of it. Then you want to grab your tool and place it there for driving it on. And then you want to get a good hammer so you can wail on it. I'm not sure if this hammer's big enough, but we're going to give it a go. This is my go-to Ford tool, and you can't work on Fords without it. It's a necessary device, especially to take out your frustrations. So just whack on this until we get it fully seated. Looks like we've got it all the way on the stub axle, so this thing's ready to rock. I am going to go ahead and lube up the inner axle shaft seal area of the axle shaft with a little bit of grease to aid in installation and to not damage the sealing surfaces we're installing. This is also a good time to replace the dust seal that goes on. They're usually trashed like this. And take time to lube your U-joint while you got the axle out. Okay, now let's reinstall the knuckle assembly. Go ahead and install the upper nut to hold the knuckle assembly in place. And then apply some blue Loctite, the medium strength Loctite, to the lower ball joint stud thread surface. Now install your lower ball joint nut and get it tightened up, but not torqued at all yet. I'm going to use an impact to just get it, the threads, since it is a locking nut, get it down to where it can be torqued, but I'm not going to torque it. Okay, it's close there, and this is part of the process that you got to be very careful about, or you'll get what's called memory steer by damaging the ball joints from improper torquing. So this is a critical part of the process, and the first step is to torque the lower ball joint at 44 foot-pounds. I've set my torque meter to 44 foot-pounds, and I'm going to torque the lower ball joint nut. Okay. Now at this point, I'm going to work it a little bit. And then I'm going to get my grease gun and put a little bit of grease in the zerks. Not very much. Don't over grease it. Just a couple squirts in the upper and lower joint. Couple there. Couple there. Now we're going to torque the upper ball joint nut to 69 foot-pounds. Now insert the cotter pin. Now we torque the lower ball joint nut to 150 foot-pounds torque on this application. Be sure to check your specifications guide for your particular application to make sure that that's the torque that you're going to be setting it at. Turn the wheel straight again. I'm going to make sure and clean this area. It's free of debris, and I'm going to put a light coating of grease on it. Or WD-40. Now I'm going to show you how to install the axle shaft assembly into the steering knuckle. Insert the axle shaft assembly into the axle housing. Support the inner side of the shaft so that it goes into the inner carrier properly. Now you'll need to grab your tool again to drive it the proper distance into the hub. Now we have our tool again in order to drive it into the proper distance into the knuckle assembly. I'm going to insert it over and gently into the knuckle assembly, and then grab my Ford tool and beat the crap out of it. There we go. You should always replace the O-ring assembly on the hub for the sealing surface around the knuckle. Again, so that no vacuum leakage is present and your auto hubs function properly. Once I've replaced the O-ring and lubricated it with a small amount of grease, we can install the hub assembly onto the knuckle. Another note is I like to take a small amount of blue Loctite and coat the beginning of the threads of the knuckle assembly before installation. Gently align it and tap it in without damaging the seal. Now we need to install our 4 retaining nuts. You don't want to just suck one side in. You want to evenly torque it down, and then we'll get to the final torque. Now on this application, we torque the hub nuts to 133 foot-pounds torque. Now we reinstall the snap ring into the outer stub axle shaft in the hub. And be sure to clean the inner face of the hub assembly to accept the hub and the hub seal and maintain a vacuum tight seal. Now apply a thin layer of lube around the sealing surface. It's recommended that you replace the O-ring on the auto hub unit as well. And once you've done so, clean up the O-ring and apply a slight layer of lubricant around the O-ring. Once you've done so, reinsert it into the hub assembly. Now line up your mounting holes with the hub assembly. Apply a small amount of medium strength Loctite to the fasteners. Now install your fasteners. Now torque the 3 hub cover retaining screws to 53 inch-pounds. Clean your hub and make sure there's no debris on the face of the hub, which would cause the rotor to run out of parallel. Now install your brake rotor. Now I'm going to prepare the caliper mounting bracket for the new brake pads. I'm also going to lube the slider bolts. I remove and clean the caliper slider bolts from the mounting bracket, and then I apply a light coating of ceramic brake lubricant to each bolt and reinsert it into the caliper bracket. You can use any type of brake part lubricant. However, I prefer this ceramic brake lube. It seems to be a superior product, works good. For this application, I am using the CarQuest professional brake pads that come with the hardware with the H on the end of the part number. Highly recommend it. They'll help you do a good brake job and avoid noise down the road or problems like that. It is a semi-metallic pad. That is the OE replacement pad for this vehicle, and these are a lifetime warranty part. Now I am coating the caliper mounting bracket to knuckle bolts with a small amount of medium strength Loctite. I'll just snug up the bolts with my impact. The front caliper mounting bracket to knuckle bolts, or otherwise known as the anchor plate mounting bracket to the knuckle bolts, are torqued at 166 foot-pounds torque. Now let's compress the caliper pistons. Placing one of the old pads on the inside of the caliper facing the caliper pistons, I'll install a C-clamp and center it, then making sure I'm depressing both calipers evenly, I'll begin to compress the caliper pistons. This part of the process is only necessary if you need to depress the caliper pistons to accommodate the replacement of the brake pads. If you're not replacing the disc brake pads, you won't need to recompress the caliper pistons at this time. Simply reinstall them on the original brake pads mounted to the caliper mounting bracket. Once it's fully compressed, I remove the C-clamp and I place the caliper assembly, making sure that the brake line is not twisted at all. And I'll insert it over the brake pads. Now again, I'll put a small amount of medium strength blue Loctite on the ends of the caliper bolts and insert them in the caliper. On this application, the front caliper bolts are torqued to 56 foot-pounds. Now I'll reconnect the vacuum line. And I'll reattach the ABS speed sensor wiring to the harness bracket points along the frame area. And reconnect the ABS wire. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean this rotor with some brake clean and make sure all that protecting film is off of it before I put the rest of the stuff together. I am going to be replacing some steering linkage parts, including the drag link and tie rod ends on this as well. So I'm not going to put that back together at this point in time. But that's pretty much a general overview of what you're going to be looking at to do this job. It is a little bit labor intensive. It's going to take you some time to do, but stick with it, and with the right tools and techniques, you should be able to get this thing handled no problem. Okay guys, remember, following any brake service, you want to get in the vehicle and pump up the brakes so you can extend those caliper pistons back up, and so you don't throw it in reverse with your brake pedal going to the floor, run over the neighbor's dog. But anyway, after doing that, go put a few miles on it with some light braking applications, get those pads seated back in. Once again, this has been the Car Doctor. Hey, thanks for watching our videos. Appreciate the likes and subscriptions to our channel, and I wish you good luck with your repairs. Have a good one.